Good day, Industrial Advisors listeners, and thank you for tuning in. If you have not subscribed, please do so by clicking subscribe wherever you podcast. Click the like button and hit the bell if you want notifications of when we put up new content. Leave us a comment about anything we discuss here today or general comments about the show. Now, let's get into it.
Welcome to our Industrial Advisors podcast from Fort Lauderdale. We are at IAMC, and today we have the GM of real estate for Yusen, Wilson Clemons, with us. We're going to talk about operational efficiency and the latest and greatest in warehouses and all the good stuff that goes along with that today. But before we jump into that, a lot of people probably don't know this about you, that you are an Ironman and have run multiple marathons.
Impressive.
I think a ultra marathon. So tell us and the listeners how you got into that.
Oh, well, don't get me started, but I got into running and cycling and all that kind of stuff, endurance athletics in the late 2000s, so around 2008. And by the 2012, I did a full Ironman. So, and I told myself I would never do a marathon, I think, in 2008. And then, after I did a marathon and a half Ironman, I told myself I'd never do a full Ironman. And, lo and behold, in 2012, I did Ironman Cozumel. So I was really proud of that. That was, that was probably my biggest physical, accomplishments of my life.
Well, and I would say mental too. I run and I can do that, but I'm always really impressed with the people that can add the swimming mainly and then the biking. But I watch people get in, the swimming part of that thing, and like people are beating up on each other, bodies are flying, and I'm just super impressed with the swimming portion of that. And then you got to, of course, do the running and the biking too. But that's awesome. Congratulations.
And speaking of the swimming portion, I will tell you, and I've done some triathlons, not a full Ironman, but a half. And I've asked a lot of, what's your strength? I've asked that to a gazillion people. And you, Wilson, you are the first one to ever say swimming.
Yeah.
So how did that happen?
Well, I was a swimmer growing up. I grew up in Florida, and I grew up here in Florida. And I enjoyed swimming. I always enjoyed swimming. It was just always my strength. And so by the time I got to Ironman, that part was sort of, I just kind of checked that off the list, and I focused on cycling. Stayed on the, kind of live on the saddle.
For sure.
You really just live on the saddle, and then you fit in your bricks and your runs. But the swimming for me was never an issue, where it was an issue for almost everyone else, where they were in the pool training, getting kind of almost like swimming lessons in a way. And I was using swimming as a tool. To me, swimming was recovery versus I didn't really have to focus on that.
Yeah. There's something that just came to me, the three of us should go compete in like a team one, because you could do, Wilson, you could do the swimming, Matt, you could do the biking, and I'll do the running.
I'm in.
Let's go win the thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Great stuff. Well, when you're off the saddle and not training, you do something there at Yusen Logistics. Tell us a little bit about Yusen in general. What do you guys do?
Well, Yusen Logistics is a global logistics company. We tend to touch almost every part of the supply chain, but what we do globally is really a combination of international freight forwarding, contract logistics, and kind of just an assortment of transportation. What I do particularly in the United States is just one small part of the global, Yusen Logistics, but it's grown to be pretty big just in itself. It's contract logistics, third-party logistics inside the United States, mostly warehousing, transloading, storage, fulfillment, and reverse logistics. So that's really our focus in my group. The Americas division, or really it's the Americas company, also does quite a bit of that same stuff, and we're under that umbrella. But international freight forwarding is also a pretty major portion of what Yusen does in the Americas and globally, and that's actually outside of my scope. But contract logistics has grown into a pretty big portion of what Yusen does globally and in the United States.
You mentioned, by the way, reverse logistics, and we touched on this on a podcast yesterday with Peer Development. Through COVID, we understand that on the online, that's grown to about 25% of all things bought online are returned. You must be just exploding in reverse logistics.
Yeah. When I started at Yusen Logistics about 5 years ago, came over from a different third-party logistics company, and we we had a small reverse logistics group. So, just the e-commerce side of things has grown exponentially for both, forward and especially in our reverse logistics.
Yeah, that's great. Well, it's really a fascinating time to just be in the warehouse business in general, right? With the way warehouses are changing and the automation and some of the technology that goes into that. And you travel the globe looking at some of that. What are some of the things that you guys are seeing from an automation and technology standpoint that helping warehouses be more efficient?
It's really exciting to see what Yusen Logistics is doing globally. We've, in Singapore, we've got fully automated facility at this point. So it's something I haven't seen before now, and I have now seen quite a bit of designs and actual implementations of a fully automated facility would include an automated storage and retrieval system, robotics picking product, robotics actually palletizing product on the way out. So you wouldn't have hardly any material handlers in the loop doing the handling. It's almost all robotics. And so what happens is your skill level kind of changes, and most of the labor has to do with control systems, maintaining the robotics, maintaining the automation. So that's pretty exciting. Germany's done some similar projects globally. So it's been exciting to see Yusen Logistics really kind of dip their toe into it, but all the way, with a facility that's completely automated.
Yeah.
You mentioned before the show when we were chatting about automation, and I'll quote you, you said, in the future, very few people will do anything on the floor. Talk to us about that in the U.S. Like, when do you see that happening with robotics, and what's the future of that?
Well, the future of robotics it's inevitable that we're going to go in the direction of technology. We're going to go in the direction of automation in warehousing and in anything associated with industrial processes. So, warehousing might actually be later to the game than manufacturing. But, in the future, there's probably, I'm thinking you're going to need probably about 30 to 40% of the labor we need now, which, from one perspective, it could be kind of a dreary picture. But another perspective, it's actually exciting to think about the technologies, the jobs will change versus the jobs disappearing.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, like I said, earlier, control systems controlling the robotics, maintaining the robotics would be your primary position versus handling the materials. So when would that happen? That's been the question for decades now, because we've been anticipating it happening sooner than it has. I think one of the biggest tipping scales is the labor rates versus the investment. So it's really going to come back to how can you make this work in your business, and also the comfort levels of the businesses to be able to do that. And one of the last things I'd say is having good partnerships and contracts across the supply chain will help solidify and give companies the freedom to make those investments.
Speaking of labor, do you guys have labor issues? Is that, it seems like it's challenging for everybody right now. Is that something that you guys are struggling with at all?
Throughout my career in third-party logistics, labor has been the hardest thing to deal with. Yes. It doesn't matter what company, who it is, where you are. Labor is the most complex piece. It's the most risky piece. And it often, usually, the most costly piece of any, contract logistics company or any labor-intensive organization, really.
What do you guys do differently to try to attract that labor? Well,
I've really made a home at Yusen for a similar reason that I hope that our material handlers and forklift drivers and warehouse control type of folks would make a home at Yusen. It's a place that feels like you're valued. You can be recognized for things like Kaizen. Kaizen is a big part of Yusen Logistics, which is another word for continuous improvement. And so we try to empower. We hope to empower the folks, and I feel empowered as an employee. I hope they feel empowered as an employee to make changes in their environment, to make positive change around them, and to be recognized for it, as well as just having good management practices, good supervision practices, being fair to folks, and creating, a kind of socially responsible workplace. That's, I think, the biggest competitive advantage to Yusen Logistics as opposed to who we might be competing against, who has a facility down the road, down the street from us. You can look at wages, you can look at work environment, but I would say it would be hard to find a place where you're respected more by your leadership and valued more by your leadership than Yusen Logistics.
Yeah, sounds like people are really empowered there, and it's a great company. You mentioned continuous improvement. Just want to stay on that topic, because when you manage multiple, hundreds of warehouses and facilities, obviously optimization is huge. So how are you guys making sure that you're maximizing efficiencies in your facilities? And we've touched on some of it already, but how are you guys maximizing efficiencies across the portfolio?
For Yusen, I think it really, or for continuous improvement in general, it goes back to the process, and then it goes back to how you roll out that type of program. So if you look at Kaizen is a part of our culture. It's not something we just put on our website or advertise or just talk about in podcasts. Kaizen is something that if you walk out on our warehouse floor, likelihood is if you talk to any person that's been there more than a few weeks, they know what Kaizen is, and they, I would hope, would be excited about Kaizen. I think they would. We have several different versions of Kaizen that's really rolled out as a program throughout our company. One of them is small incremental improvements, and that's kind of your meat and potatoes of what a material handler or a forklift driver or a supervisor on the floor would be able to be empowered to do. And then the benefit of that for the company as a whole is now you have foot soldiers every day looking at the operations and the processes and making small improvements, which is going to make a bigger impact on the greater scheme of things than, say, a major business optimization, from a high level. Now, business reengineering, also part of our Kaizen program, not done, on the front lines. And that would be one of those things that we talked about globally that Yusen is also taking on, like a fully automated facility, where you completely look from a high level and rethink the way you do everything, where it's completely disrupted from what is the conventional way of doing that type of operation. So it spans from doing a 5S, a small little change on the front lines, all the way to a complete business reengineering of a major facility.
Yeah, it's awesome. It sounds like it's just part of the culture. Like you start there, that's how you guys do things.
That's how we do things, yeah.
That's impressive. One of Yusen's core competencies is transloading. Can you, for the listener, define transloading and talk to us about the savings that's created by transloading?
Transloading is really, it's kind of like cross-docking. It's basically cross-docking, but what it really means is you're going from one mode of transportation to another. So we would receive inbound ocean containers, and then we would ship out over-the-road trailers or ship out rail containers. So you're going to change from one mode to another. You're going to transload. Mm-hmm. The reason why it's valuable, especially right around the ports, is containers 40-foot. There's a 40-foot container or a 20-foot container, and then there's a 53-foot trailer or 53-foot rail container. And by the time you transload from the ocean to that container and also split out and allocate orders across multiple containers that are split a different way than they came in on the containers, you'll save between 10 and 30% of your transportation, which transportation is the largest expense in the supply chain. So that's why so many major shippers are doing transloading, because it just makes sense from a network optimization point of view, reducing your transportation, having a critical mixing kind of a distribution point at a particular portion of their supply chain. Awesome.
Well, it's been great to have you join us here today live. It's been great. Really good topics here, and it'll be fascinating to watch, as warehouses continue to improve and automate and see how things go. But I know you guys will be leading the charge at Yusen, and the whole continuous improvement game at Yusen will continue to be strong. So thanks a lot, Wilson, for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys. Thanks for having me here, and it's a great place, and good to see you guys.
Thanks a lot.